Re-Zero, Arc 8, Chapter 14, The Kingdom and the Empire.
Priscilla and Yorna had not returned. The lack of disagreement from the other people in the cabin made it clear that he had not misheard the startling information that came from Emilia's mouth. The siege of the imperial capital of Lupagana, in the midst of the battle between the regular army of the Empire and the rebels who had risen against them, one could only imagine the magnitude of the role that Priscilla and Yorna had played. At the same time, Subaru's fists clenched tightly in the realization of one thing. Subaru, so Tanza's disheartened expression, that was the reason. Subaru had woken up in the bed in the coupled dragon carriage, and some members of the battalion came to visit him. He was concerned that among them, Tanza had been looking depressed the whole time. Subaru had planned to discuss the future course of action with Emilia, Abel, and the others, and then try to ask Tanza again once things had settled down. However, before Subaru could actually do so, the reason for Tanza's anxiety became clear to him. Subaru, so even though those two didn't come back, we still left the imperial capital? Vincent. There is no end to the list of those who participated in the battle and have not yet returned. Of course, the presence of her and Yorna Miss Higya would be substantial, but they shall not be given special treatment. Subaru, but Yorna-san is. Even then. You also should have had some sort of bond with Priscilla. Subaru appealed to Abel as he glanced out the window of the dragon carriage, seeing the scenery outside pass by as it rode forth, and thinking of the imperial capital that was moving away in the distance. He had not known the full details of the situation. But Priscilla, who had rushed to his predicament in the fortress city, had literally flown there, likely to protect Abel. The exchanges that followed, while sharp as if they were pointing blades at each other, seemed to have a certain sense of familiarity between two people who knew each other well. Abel must not have been at peace with the desertion of Priscilla. Perhaps his earlier distraught reaction in Subaru's cabin was not solely due to the person known as Chaisha, who had died. Goes, you, how dare you speak so rudely to His Excellency? However, the one to raise an objection to Subaru's attitude had not been Abel himself, but the large man beside him, a scarred-faced man clad in golden armor. Goes Ralphon, while the volume of his voice erupted like a volcano, he looked down upon the boy who was hounding the emperor that Goes had pledged his loyalty to. Goes, looking at the particulars of the situation in the imperial capital, it would only be natural for His Excellency to abandon the capital. The remaining generals, soldiers, and people will understand the validity of His Excellency's judgment. Subaru, I'm not talking about whether it was right or wrong. What I'm trying to say is, Goes, you, Vincent, cease this, Goes Ralphon. It is not in his nature to stay silent. Goes's face turned red at Subaru's insistence, but Abel stopped him with his hand. At the sound of Abel's calm voice, Goes closed his half-opened mouth, and he hung his head in respect. Subaru, on the other hand, looked at Abel with an embarrassed look on his face. Subaru, sorry for all the fuss. But I'm going to repeat the same thing to you, Vincent. It is as Goes said. Remaining in the imperial capital under the current circumstances is tantamount to throwing away one's life. I could not make such a decision. Of course, there is fear regarding the safety of Priscilla and Yorna Miss Higya. Emilia, you know, Subaru, it's not all bad news. Well, it's said that even amidst bad news, there's also hope. In front of Subaru, Emilia placed her hand on Subaru's shoulder with lowered eyebrows. She, like Subaru, was very concerned about the safety of Priscilla and Yorna. If she said there was hope, it was for Subaru's sake, as well. Subaru, by hope, what kind do you mean? Emilia, Priscilla and Yorna-san are both really strong, but not only that, they have the power to influence the others around them. Subaru, around them. Yeah. Though I don't know if that's the case with Priscilla. Yorna, the ruler of the demon city of Chaos Flame, had enhanced the entire city's power with her soul marriage technique, an ability to connect the path of her soul with all the city's inhabitants. That also applied to Tanza, whose unparalleled power, despite her appearance as nothing more than a lovely dear girl, was something different from the Pleiades battalion's overall enhancement. It seemed to be a rather powerful supportive effect, and the effect persisted even on the Gladiator Island, far from Chaos Flame, and even during the siege of the imperial capital. Subaru, Could it be that Tanza's enhancements are still in place? Beatrice, in addition, the effect on those who have joined us from the Demon City remains in place, I suppose. Ram, naturally, that means General First Class Yorna, the wielder of that mystic art, is alive and well. That's why Emily, who is of a nervous disposition, is not panicking. Emilia, yeah, I'm not panicking. And Priscilla is the same way. Subaru, Priscilla, is the same? Beatrice and Ram corroborated Subaru's guess. Then, Emilia's follow-up statement that Yorna and Priscilla were the same caused Subaru to frown. If he were to interpret that at face value, it would mean Priscilla was a user of the same technique as Yorna. Subaru, but that doesn't sound like a Priscilla-like ability, and I thought Abel said the soul marriage technique was really difficult to use. Was that a lie, Vincent, fool? What is in it for me to deceive you? I do not care what you think of me now, but there is no reason to recklessly provoke animosity here. Use your head, Subaru. If that wasn't supposed to provoke my animosity, you're not cut out to be emperor. Even if it was not this time, in the near future, this was behavior that would surely lead to a revolt. When Subaru raised this point, Goes again became angry, but Bastet's, standing next to him, intervened and prevented a major incident. Otto, in any case, though I do understand Natsuki-san's impression of Priscilla Summer, she is a user of this so-called soul marriage technique. I have seen it with my own eyes. Emilia, Otto-kun is right, I saw it too. However, unlike Yorna's extraordinary use of it, in her case, it is limited to her favorite servant Kun. Subaru, her favorite, Schult. Speaking of which, what about Al? In conjunction with Priscilla having not returned, when the conversation turned to her camp, Subaru asked about the man in the iron helmet, who had not been seen here or in the coupled dragon carriages. Al's position was that of Priscilla's knight, although both master and servant did not approve of it at all. He, too, was easygoing and frivolous, but he was certainly loyal to Priscilla. Naturally, Al must have felt most responsible for Priscilla not returning. Beatrice, that man, he didn't get on the dragon carriage and instead remained in the imperial capital. In fact, just as Subaru thought, he is taking action to search for Priscilla, I suppose. Subaru, that guy? No way, all by himself? Ram, he was of the opinion that by his lonesome, he would be quicker to adapt to changing circumstances. Ram is in agreement with that idea. It would not be a good idea to leave so many people in the imperial capital under those circumstances. Subaru, damn, so that's why. HK, he received an answer about the absent Al, but it was a fact that made Subaru's brow wrinkle. Despite his appearance, Al was quite astute, and he was someone who specialized in surviving things beyond his capability. Still, there was no doubt that his strength was a step below from those who were truly strong. Despite being aware of this, Al supported Subaru like a relative. Even in the Demon City, there were many times when Subaru would have lost his life if it had not been for him. Otto, as for Priscilla Summer's camp, Priscilla Summer is at the top. Al Dono, her follower, and Heinkel Dono, who accompanied her, are missing. Schult Khan is resting in a cabin. Subaru, Heinkel. Somehow, that's a name that I have an incredibly unpleasant memory of. Otto, he is a drunkard. Beatrice, that description fails to get the point across. In fact, he is Reinhardt's father, I suppose. Subaru, dash. That shitty father. Why is that guy in the Empire? Eyes opened wide, Subaru retrieved an unpleasant recollection from the depths of his memory. In the Watergate city of Pristella, Heinkel was the man who ruined the atmosphere when they had all been sitting in harmony. On that subject, he had been with Priscilla and the others, but it was surprising that he was also present in the Empire. Egotistical and self-centered, it seemed like he would never have wanted to come to the Walachian Empire. Emilia, but Heinkel-san is also missing. Subaru, just like Priscilla and Yorna, he hasn't returned. Damn it, I don't know how to feel about this. Of course, he did not want him to die, nor did he think he should die. On the other hand, he was not a person whom he thought of fondly, so he had no reason to wish for him to stay alive beyond not wanting to make Reinhardt or Wilhelm sad. But he had a thought about the results of him participating in that battle. Subaru, Heinkel, a man of the kingdom of Lagunica and father of Reinhardt, the Sword Saint, a situation in which that man, caught up in a battle of the Wallachian Empire, ended up losing his life. The thought of that caused even Subaru, who was not on friendly terms with him, to feel a bitter emotion. Subaru needed to return to the kingdom with all of his precious companions, no matter what, and so, it happened at the moment when Subaru had just strengthened his resolve. Otto, the circumstances of Priscilla's summer and Yorna-san are as I have told you. On top of that, I would like to make a firm statement before we start the meeting going over the future course of action. The one who began to speak after a heavy silence had fallen over the cabin was Otto. He stood up on the spot and held up one index finger to attract the attention of those around him, and, Otto, as I am sure you know, we are people of the kingdom. Having acknowledged that we are responsible for crossing the border at a time when we were not allowed to cross, I will state this. Vincent, state it. Otto, yes. We have accomplished our objective. Once we enter the fortified city of Gartla, we will proceed to go northward through the Kuraragai city-states, and then return to the kingdom of Lagunica. In the midst of this unprecedented crisis in the Wallachian Empire, in front of the Wallachian emperor who was undergoing the emergency of his country being brought to ruin, Otto made a clear declaration. Otto, Natsuki-san and Emily, please remain silent. That's what Subaru and Emilia were told before they could even say anything, taking the wind out of their sails. Without turning his gaze to them, Otto's statement had surprised Subaru and Emilia before they would begin to vehemently protest, and had successfully allowed him to make the first moves. Though, Subaru's and Emilia's reactions were natural. With the imperial capital in such a state of destruction, and with no knowledge of the safety of Priscilla and Yorna, it would be too extreme to make plans to return to their home country. Ram, you may call me heartless, but Ram is in agreement with Otto's plan. We retrieved Rem and, incidentally, the short-limbed Barusu. Those results are satisfactory. Emilia, Ram. HK, Ram, there's no use in giving those wistful eyes, Emily. You should also understand. It is merely that Ram's group unexpectedly accomplished this without losing anything. It's far too dangerous to go any further. In place of Subaru and Emilia, who had been ordered to be quiet, Ram gave her opinion of approval of Otto's plan. Ram, having given a cold answer to Emilia's imploring gaze, partially closed her eyes in her usual pose, sitting on a chair and hugging her elbow. Unexpectedly, they just accomplished it without losing anything. Ram was right to express it that way. As a matter of fact, they failed to bring Priscilla and Yorna back to this place. There was no guarantee that that would not happen to someone in their camp. Serena, Dudley, do you agree with your wife? Roswell, she's not my wife, but I'm generally in agreement with both of them. The one who brought Roswell to this topic with that exchange was Serena, a beautiful woman with a conspicuous white scar on her face. Was the one Serena referred to as wife meant to be Ram? While denying that allegation, Roswell concurred with Otto and Ram. Roswell, in fact, if you look only at our objectives, I'd say it was a perfect accomplishment. His limbs have become a little shorter, and the girl who was supposed to be asleep has become a tomboy, but the results are excellent. I guess withdrawing to the kingdom here would be the decision with the least fear of losses. Ram, even if Barusu's teeth haven't finished coming out, Ram says the loss is minimal. Subaru, all of my teeth have come out, damn it. Hoping for no argument, Ram ragged on her impression of Subaru's size. Regardless, given the bad course the conversation was taking, Subaru's eyes wandered around. Otto, Ram, and Roswell were the three people in the Emilia camp who had a strong voice in policy-making meetings because of their practical wisdom. Despite being the crown of Emilia's camp, it was not unusual for Emilia's and Subaru's opinion to not be accepted. Rather, it was quite common. Subaru, so the only one on our side is Biko? Beatrice, sorry Subaru, but Betty is more on their side. In fact, isn't it far too dangerous to associate any more with the Empire, given that Subaru has shrunk, I suppose? Subaru, no way, even you. Subaru's eyes widened in shock at his partner's unexpected betrayal. However, although she looked apologetic, there was no sign of Beatrice saying it's a joke. In fact, she was saying that because she really cared about Subaru. In short, Emilia, Subaru, it's just Emilia Tan and I. Squeezing her white hand tightly, Emilia's amethyst eyes wavered. Subaru cleared his throat at her call and broke out in a cold sweat because he was so outmatched. At the very least, if the others who were not there were present, it would be a different story. Otto, just for the record, Petra-chan agrees with us. Frederica-san is passive, but would prefer to return to our home country. Garfield is the only one on your side. Subaru, only Emilia-tan, Garfield and I. Stop joking around. Emilia, somehow I'm feeling really helpless, with their wishful thinking smashed by pragmatism. The helplessness of Subaru's and Emilia's opinion was strengthened. If this were a meeting where decisions were made by fistfighting, the presence of Emilia and Garfield would be an overwhelming advantage, but they were simply not suited to other kinds of meetings. God. What a farce. I can't stand to watch this. It was Goes who said as much while snorting at the arguments within Subaru's group. For him, who had previously complained about Subaru's attitude towards Abel, he must have felt that all the words and deeds of his faction were disrespectful to the Emperor. Taking a large step forward, Goes picked Subaru up by the nape of the neck. He truly did, and when he plucked him up with his two thick fingers, Subaru cried wah. In astonishment, Goes, this is a matter for the Empire. If you are citizens of the kingdom and not of the Empire, then you should cross the border as soon as possible, as per the policy you have established. Your strength is not required. Subaru, wait a second. We're not quite done with our side of the conversation yet. Goes, silence. With his legs dangling in the air, a tremendous voice had struck Subaru dizzy. Even with his hands covering his ears, Goes's voice penetrated his defense as if it were a weapon. However, his argument came from his pride in being an imperial soldier, and Subaru had no reason to follow suit. Additionally, the same was true for outsiders other than Subaru. Emilia, that's enough, Goes-san. First, put Subaru down, then we can talk about this properly. Immediately, stepping forward with her hands on her hips was Emilia. She looked up at Goes, who was holding Subaru in his hands, and communicated her firm will to him. Her attitude made Goes scowl deeply, and with his scarred face, he looked down at Emilia. Goes, and you, I see you share this boy's opinion. But the sword wolves of the Empire will accept no charity. Your help is unnecessary. Join your comrades and promptly. Emilia, that. I have a really strong objection to that. Goes, what? Emilia, you say that our power isn't necessary. But I don't think that's the case at all. Beatrice, her voice has gotten loud in the heat of the moment. In fact, not wanting to lose to Goes's vigor, Emilia's voice, akin to the ring of a silver bell, grew louder and louder. The beauty remained intact, but Emilia's voice sounded more like the toll of a large bell than regular ones, and when she challenged him directly, Goes's expression twisted. Thrusting her finger towards Goes, who wore a contorted expression, Emilia continued. Emilia, after all, even in the battle for the imperial capital, if it weren't for me, Priscilla, and the others, everyone would have really struggled a lot more. Goes, Emilia, all of us. We were very strong, isn't that right, Bastet-san? Speaking with a loud voice, Emilia turned the conversation to Bastet's. Eyes as narrow as threads, the old man was unfazed by the sudden nomination. Yes, I suppose so, he replied, wringing the moustache around his mouth with his fingers. Bastet's, for my part, it was unexpected that the first-class generals would be unable to succeed in their battles. If that was the contribution of these women, Serena, it feels strange to talk about things from our perspective, but the white light that was fired from the palace. It was dispelled by that girl in the dress. Bastet's, my. Cocking her chin, Serena mentioned Beatrice's achievement. Upon hearing this, Bastet's expression tightened slightly as he wondered what she had done to the light. Just before Subaru and his team arrived at the battlefield, a single shot very nearly decided the battle. Beatrice's achievement in erasing that shot was mentioned, so as her partner, he was proud. Subaru, well, Goes-san, the prerequisites are different now, right? You say you don't need our help, but without us, the situation would have been much worse. Emilia, yes. I don't know specifically, but I imagine it would have been a lot worse. Beatrice, Emily, it's time to turn down the volume. I suppose. Subaru and Emilia had attacked in waves, with Serena and then Bastet's also providing support, causing Go's lips to twitch. It would be difficult if only Subaru and his team had insisted, but in this situation, to be acknowledged by Serena and her colleagues, who also participated in the top-level meeting, seemed to be highly effective against Go's, who gave off a strong sense of having worked his way up as a military man. However, Go's, I certainly acknowledge your contributions. But, in the first place, you have not concluded the most important discussions among yourselves. Subaru, that's, Emilia, that's not wrong. He gave them a reasonable counterargument, and Subaru and Emilia were disheartened. Here, even if they were able to overcome Go's, it only meant that they had defeated an easy opponent, but it did not mean that Subaru and his allies' ideas would go unchallenged. Rather, in comparison to Go's, there were more difficult people to convince. Otto, I know it sounds callous, but let me say this. As soon as Subaru recognized his adversary again, that opponent spoke up as if he had seen it coming, beginning to speak in a way that gave off naught but a bad premonition. Otto looked between Subaru, who was being grabbed, and at Go's, who was grabbing him, and, Otto, as General First Class Go says, this is an issue for the Empire. Unlike the necessity of the situation that befell us, to get actively involved from this point on could become an international incident, interfering in the internal affairs of other countries. Subaru, Ga. HK, Otto, first of all, why would you want to interfere so badly, Natsuki-san? Whatever the case may be, it is probably due to your obligation to the people you have come to know in the Empire up to this point, or some other such thing, correct? Subaru, don't talk like you know what is going on. But anyway, is what I want really so wrong? Otto, not wrong, but I also have this to persuade you. Well, what I mean is, what if Natsuki-san takes all the people who he cannot abandon out of the Empire? Otto was someone who aimed to solve problems through reason, so displaying that philosophy to the greatest extent, he caused Subaru's eyes to widen at the outrageous proposal he had just made. As if Go's was just as surprised, his fingers slipped as he dropped Subaru onto the floor. Naturally, this also took Emilia by surprise. As she helped Subaru, who had fallen onto his butt on the floor, she looked over, saying, Otto-kun? And, Emilia, what do you mean by that? No way, are you really? Otto, there is no twist, that is just what I am proposing. That even in these circumstances, we should perform the reckless action of taking the people who want to come with us. Fortunately, we have the right to make the decision. Glancing over, Otto's gaze turned to Roswell. Roswell was supposedly hiding his identity within the Empire, but it was true that he was the most powerful man in the Emilia camp. If Otto's opinion was accepted, Roswell would be the one to guarantee the acceptance of those seeking refuge. Then, at Otto's challenging manner, Roswell shut his yellow eye. Roswell, at the very least, I'm sure my employer wouldn't refuse. If it keeps them from taking a risk they don't have to take, then it's a necessary expense. Ram, since you're referring to Barusu, with his immature way of thinking, the majority of the people he's latched onto are likely those who don't have the strength to fight. They would not be people that the Empire would regret letting go of. While negotiations were happening at a daunting level, Subaru and company were left to the side as they were being talked about. Neither Roswell's overly broad sense of self-preservation, nor Ram's speculation based on his insight into Subaru's character, found room to interject, and the conversation proceeded in a muddled manner. Otto, what do you think, Your Excellency the Emperor? If we can reduce the number of casualties in your country as much as possible, our proposal is not a bad one, correct, Vincent? A very well thought-out proposal. The kind that is difficult to so easily dismiss. Otto, thank you for the consideration. Abel's words affirmed that it was a shrewd proposal, and Otto bowed socially. However, for Otto's part, it would not be surprising if he was imagining himself sticking out his tongue. Imperialism and Otto were incompatible. Not necessarily in terms of ability, but in terms of character. Like Subaru, it seemed Otto did not like the Empire. They were of the same opinion on that. The only thing Otto was doing on top of that, was organizing things based on importance. Subaru, Ga, it felt as if he had gone and fixed a hole on the ship they were meant to ride on his own, but ended up remaking the ship into a different one entirely. This ship sailed in a different direction from what Subaru had wished, but it flowed and drifted to protect the lives of Subaru's precious ones, heading for a different shore. Subaru knew that this was something that had been thought out in consideration of him and his companions. He knew that, and yet, Otto, how about it, Natsuki-san? This is the best I can do in terms of compromise and consideration. Rather than unsparingly dismissing Subaru's opinions, Otto tried to accommodate Subaru's opinions as much as possible and, at the same time, ensure their safety. He thought he was a reliable guy, but he was far too troublesome an opponent when they had a serious disagreement. He was a man who should have been given a drink and left in a drunken stupor before this discussion had occurred. To Otto's overpowered theoretical armament, how could Subaru, who only had a cypress stick, Emilia, hey, Abel, I have something I want to ask you, Subaru, Emilia-tan? Suddenly, Emilia, who must have shared the same opinion as Subaru, while also feeling the same frustration at being pushed around, approached Abel with a remark. Looking at her profile, Subaru's eyes widened. Unlike Subaru, who was forced into silence as he looked frustrated and tried to find a way out of the situation, neither Emilia's eyes nor her profile showed signs of being outmatched. At Emilia's dignified and brave call, Abel's sable eyes trained their gaze on her. Prompted by his silence, Emilia's thin lips moved. Emilia, how many people are there in the Wallachian Empire altogether? Vincent. The civil war this month has probably reduced the number considerably, but it was roughly 50 million or so before that. Emilia, I see. With a furrowed brow, Abel answered Emilia's question. Hearing his answer, Emilia let out a short breath, then raised a finger to her lips and looked at Subaru, and then, Emilia, you heard him, Subaru, Subaru, so said Emilia to Subaru. For a moment, Subaru failed to catch the meaning of the words that she gave him, and then his eyes immediately widened and his cheeks stiffened. Then, as he hesitated for a moment wondering what he should do with it which prompted such a reaction, Beatrice, Subaru, Betty has already voiced her opinion, in fact. But, Subaru, Beatrice, Betty will always be on Subaru's side, I suppose. Holding onto Subaru's hesitant hand, Beatrice snuggled her body up next to him. Beatrice was almost the same height as Subaru, and her eyes were even closer than usual. As they stared at him, Subaru took a deep breath in, and exhaled. Then, still under Emilia's expecting gaze, Subaru looked at Otto. Looking up at him, he spoke. Subaru, 50 million. Otto, what? At that blunt statement, Otto asked this back as he raised his shapely eyebrows. At that reply, Subaru's chest heaved, his cheeks contorted into a smile, and then he repeated what he had said. Subaru, you told me earlier. You told me to take all the people that I can't abandon with me to the kingdom. In that case, the ones I can't abandon are those 50 million people. Otto, HK, Natsuki-san, Subaru, I know. You're the one who's right. I'm the one who's spouting nonsense. I understand that everyone came to save me and Rem, and I get what you're saying. But, Subaru thrust his hand out at Otto, who had raised an eyebrow, and while Subaru mocked himself, he could not pull his own weight. There was no way that he could have beaten Otto, Ram, and Roswell if he had been forced to reason with them. So then Subaru would do what he could with Emilia and Garfield on his side. In other words, when faced with logic, he had become unreasonable with an emotional argument. Subaru, it's a hell of a bad situation. If we leave and the empire is ruined, then what? Just thinking about it is enough to make me not want to eat. Otto, what about the risk that we will bear? If we save 50 million strangers but in exchange one of us dies or sustains a wound that cannot be healed, it will be much more painful. Subaru, I'm not gonna let any of us die or get into that kind of trouble. That's an absolute. So what the hell even matters past that? Subaru retorted to Otto's as he quietly cornered him. Then, he looked not at Otto, but at Roswell, who was standing off to the side with one eye closed. Subaru, Roswell. You should know. My absolutes are absolutes. Roswell, I am Dudley, Subaru-kun, though it would be somewhat too dishonest for me to not nod my head to that question, given my high expectations of your absolutes. Though a bit of a roundabout way of putting it, Roswell put his hands up in response to Subaru's opinion. Even if he did not know about return by death, Roswell knew about Subaru's authority. So, the part of him that had expectations of that authority would not allow for Subaru's mood to be harmed. In the first place, if he were to fall for Roswell's cajolery here, what would become of his oath from back at the sanctuary? Emilia, Ram, please, Ram, Emily, do you at least have something to convince Ram? Emilia, I'm just trying to do my best and I just want to help everyone. So, please, on the contrary, Emilia took a ridiculously brute force approach and asked a favor of Ram. If Subaru would have done the same thing, Ram would have mercilessly smacked him with a verbal slap, but she was unable to respond effectively to Emilia's forcefulness. Then, Ram let out a small sigh. Ram would have been fine as long as Rem could be brought home. But the way that Rem is now, she's become so close to the people of the Empire. If that was to be ignored, it would be harmful to Ram's dignity as an older sister, which she has only now finally realized. Emilia, Ram, stop, it's irritating. Emilia hugged Ram, who had closed her eyes and found her own reason for compromise. Ram responded to Emilia's embrace with an unpleasant look on her face, and so, Roswell and Ram caved in a way that could only have been achieved by some hard work. However, Subaru, Otto, please, Otto, are you going to use the same persuasion by tears as Emily did? Sorry, but I am not like Ram-san. I am not foolish enough to sign a contract when I do not know what the price that I will have to pay is. Subaru, Biko is also begging you. Beatrice, Betty is also begging you. In fact, Otto, even if you have 2 or 3 people, I will not budge. Subaru urged Beatrice to join him, but Otto preemptively stopped Emilia, who was hugging Ram, from joining in again. Otto's face showed that he was completely determined not to let his decision be swayed by emotion. His stubbornness was akin to the difficulty of when Subaru faced off against the maniacally obsessed Roswell. However, even if he conveyed that slanderous remark to Otto right now, he would not listen. Otto, we would only be taking a risk, there would be no advantages in going along with the thinking of Natsuki-san and the rest of you. You do not even satisfy the conditions to persuade me with tears. Ram-san, and Dudley-san as well, please do not go so easy on them. Roswell, Oya, I've been scolded. Ram, for someone of Otto's social standing, you're quite impudent. Otto spoke sternly, Roswell shrugged his shoulders, and Ram frowned. But, they did not hold an opinion different from Otto's, so the two did not argue any further. In reality, if the fortress known as Otto could not be conquered, they would not be able to push past this situation. After all, merely imposing circumstances that everyone did not agree on from above, was something that neither Emilia, nor the Emilia camp, could deem as acceptable. Then, Vincent, you said that there would be no advantages. In that case, the conversation would change if there were to be advantages. Otto, it was neither Subaru nor Emilia, but Abel who had interjected. At the Emperor's intrusion into the conversation, Otto's gaze sharpened. Unlike Subaru's flippant way of talking, Otto turned his disrespectful gaze towards the Emperor. Otto, if there is any advantage, that is. What in the world do you intend on? I will say this in advance, there is no possible compensation that could make it worthwhile for us. Vincent, towards a royal candidate of the Kingdom of Lagunica, I formally request assistance. Otto, HK. At Abel's proposition, Otto's expression tightened, and he made a sound with his throat. At the same time, several expressions began to violently tremble, and more so than those of Subaru and his companions, it was those of the ones on the side of the Empire. Serena laughed at those words while Bestetz's slitted eyes widened. Then, with astonishment plastered on his face, Goes spread out his hands, and as if it were the very end of the world, Goes, please wait, Your Excellency. A request for the kingdom's assistance. Such a thing. It is completely unprecedented in this sacred Wallachian Empire. Vincent, what matter is it if there is a precedent or not? If you say that, what precedent is there for an unsightly emperor to lose the imperial capital to such an impudent bunch? Such a foolish fixation, Goes, but the soldiers and generals and citizens will lament that you have made a decision not worthy of the sword wolf if you choose to rely on the aid of another nation. I say this respectfully, but a shadow will be cast over the authority of Your Excellency the Emperor. Vincent, a shadow cast over my authority. Such a foolish concern. Towards Goze's loud complaint, Abel shook his head as he supplied that reply. At this declaration, Goze froze as his eyes widened. Looking back at Goze, Abel called out Goze Ralphon, the name of his retainer. Vincent, currently, is hollow authority without any substance what we need? That is not so. Right now, the Empire desires to be victorious. To bite off the throats of our enemies, to bathe in their blood, to gorge on their lives. Before any of that, the victory we obtain will be what shapes the Empire's tomorrow. Goze, why Your Excellency? Vincent, those who sink their fangs in and become a hindrance, they are all enemies of the law of iron and blood imposed by Vincent Wallachia. Answer carefully, Goze Ralphon. Goze, Vincent, are you my enemy? As he was asked this question quietly, Goze's entire body began to shake, showing no signs of his struggle with Subaru back in the cabin. Standing upright, there was power in Abel as he displayed his might as emperor. There was a dominant power in his gaze, in his voice, and in his very being itself, and Goze had to face that power up close and head-on, all by himself. Then, after a period of careful contemplation that must have lasted less than 5 seconds, Goze, I beg Your Excellency's pardon for taking up so much of your time. I am Goze Ralphon, the warhammer that will shatter the many obstacles that stand in your way. Never will I be your enemy, Vincent. If that is the case, then so be it. I am relying on your work. Strive to do better. Goze, yes sir. Nodding to Goze's boisterous answer, Abel responded with his expectation that his subjects should work at their best. After accepting it emphatically, Goze let out a thunderous sound. Perhaps it was the words that Abel added that caused his surprise. Goze, HK, I shall give my utmost efforts. Goze wiped his face with his thick arm and pledged to Abel again in a trembling voice, while tears streamed down his face. Looking away from him, Abel glanced at Serena and Bastetts. Vincent, you two also have no objections? Serena, no. You have a look that I like, and I feel more loyalty to His Excellency than ever. Bastetts, no. Not even from me. Except that I am more than a little surprised. Vincent, Serena smiled, and Bastetts once again narrowed his eyes. After letting out a snort at their demeanor, Abel then proceeded to go forward and stand in front of Emilia. Then, he looked at Emilia, who was blinking her eyes. Vincent, you have heard me correctly, candidate for the royal selection. The Wallachian Empire formally requests the assistance of the Kingdom of Lagunica to put an end to this situation. Lend us your strength, Emilia. Abel. I would certainly like to help you, too. But, I really don't know what you're talking about with this royal selection candidate stuff. Subaru, Emilia Tan, no. This is one of those times where you don't need to keep it secret. Emilia, what? Are you sure? Emilia, who looked really distressed by Abel's offer, widened her eyes. Both Subaru and Beatrice nodded back at her repeatedly, and Emilia looked at Ram, who was still in her embrace, seeking further confirmation. Then, Ram shook off Emilia's arms and pushed her away from her. Ram, yes, of course. Do what you wish, Emilia Summer. Emilia, When Ram called her Emilia, Emilia was surprised as her eyes lit up. She blinked to hide her joy behind her eyelids and then turned to face Abel once again. As Abel waited for her to resume, a slight frown on his brow, Emilia cleared her throat with an ahem. Emilia, I am Emilia, just Emilia, a royal selection candidate for the Kingdom of Lagunica to decide who will become the next king. And one who wants to help the empire that is currently in danger. Vincent. This is a formal request. The Wallachian Empire would never ask for the cooperation of a person from another country, even one in such a position of great responsibility. Therefore, if this fact became public, it would serve as a tailwind for you, who is fighting for the throne in the kingdom. Emilia, geez. That kind of stuff can wait. What I want to do now is this. When Abel tried to lay out some solid logic, Emilia puffed out her cheeks. With that cute puffed-up face, Emilia presented her hand to Abel. Slowly lowering her lifted hand, Emilia offered it to Abel. Emilia, allow us help your empire. In the end, it conversely seemed as if Emilia was the one who broached the subject. Looking down at Emilia's outstretched hand, Abel glanced toward Subaru for a moment. Subaru smiled and nodded with a wicked look on his face at the faint bewilderment arising in Abel's black eyes. Subaru, by all means, Your Excellency the Emperor. I allow you to hold my Emilia Tan's hand, Emilia, and that's why I say Subaru is mine. Emilia Riley responded to Subaru's light-hearted comment, to which Abel closed one eye and sighed. Then, his hand slowly grasped Emilia's proffered hand. Vincent, very well. I shall accept your aid. Again, in the end, this was a very Abel-like thing to say, in establishing cooperation between the two countries, and thus, Emilia and Abel shook hands, and an historical moment between the Kingdom of Lagunica and the Wallachian Empire was engraved. Subaru, Otto-san, any opinions on something of that sort? That event with the Subaru and Emilia party and the Abel plus Empire party had come to a climax, their exchange ultimately reaching a handshake, yet Otto, the one who had first suggested something of the sort to begin with, had been left to the wayside. A compromise with Roswell and Ram had been found, but since Otto, for whom that had not been that case, had been left behind as the matter progressed, Subaru had been filled with trepidation. Since he was aware that he had been way out of line, he subconsciously asked Otto for his opinion, buttering him up with formal language and a polite demeanor. Otto, and to that inquiry posed timidly by Subaru, Otto went without replying. Too scared to look at Otto's face, Subaru found being answered with silence greatly troubling. Thoughtlessly, he hugged Beatrice to his side, their cheeks coming into contact. Subaru, what should I do, Biko? Otto won't talk to me. Beatrice, Betty understands that feeling, I suppose. From Otto's perspective, he must feel like you've played him for a complete fool. In fact, you ruined his idea, and made him look like a complete clown, I suppose. Subaru, a clown, even if he doesn't resemble Roswell that much. Beatrice, stop it. In fact, an insult that massive will only make him angrier and angrier, I suppose. Flustered and panicked, Subaru and Beatrice fumbled for a way to break the impasse. Together, he wished to make amends for making Otto lose face, but just what should he do? Subaru, shall I give you a foot or a shoulder massage? Beatrice, it's like, you're apologizing for angering your parents. In fact, Subaru, because I can't think of anything else. Otto, I'm begging you. Hick, with Subaru unable to come up with a decent enough proposal, Otto, having stood in silence until then before the former, abruptly pulled a chair, then sat down on it with a plop. Surprised by that sudden action, Subaru and Beatrice jumped back while still embracing one another. Certainly it was not that he had sat on the chair to have Subaru give him a shoulder massage, and, before the panicky duo of Subaru and Beatrice, Otto brought a hand to his forehead. Otto, well, have you calmed down and settled for my desired compromise? Subaru, hair? Letting out a long and deep breath, Otto massaged the skin around his eyes. Taking in the words he had declared, Subaru was left stumped, and blinking his eyes alongside a no way, he spoke. Subaru, no way you thought this would happen from the beginning. Otto, I did not think it would turn out this way, but I was eager to do something this big. Because, I did not know just how many concessions Emperor Vincent would present. But, since you and Emilia-sama would not change your opinions anyway, Natsuki-san, I needed to devise some compromises. Subaru, Faced with that nonchalant response of Otto's, Subaru's mouth was left agape. In disbelief, Subaru turned around. However, his eyes met those of Roswell and Ram. Then, those two also wore looks on their faces that said that for the most part, they had generally understood everything. Subaru, you guys are scary ye. Otto, how upsetting. First and foremost, it only happened because you guys were so stubborn, Natsuki-san. Subaru, I can't trust anyone besides Biko and Emilia Tan anymore. And Rem. And Louis. And Tanza and everyone from the battalion, and Flop-san and Medium-san, and Myzelda-san and the people of Shadrach. Beatrice, there was still a lot more, I suppose. While squeezing Beatrice tight in a hug, Subaru could not help but feel fear towards the meticulous mental preparation of Otto and the others of the Brainiac squad. Perhaps Abel had paid some extent of heed to their plans, but even so, Subaru, no, scary, I really can't handle this. From now on, I'll be taking the emotional approach. Beatrice, Betty does not understand that conclusion, but she thinks it would be better if Subaru took a route in which he was honest with himself. In fact, if that route is the emotional one, then Betty likes it, I suppose. Subaru, yeah, I love you too. Geez, really. Finally, the shock of the earlier Otto shock began to wear off, and Subaru was relieved, and it happened just as his feelings were simmering down with that exchange. Unexpectedly, the clapping of hands rang out within the cabin. Dearie me, feels like I've just stumbled upon something incredibly delightful. So darn amazing, it's quite a big deal. Loud applause had been produced, and reflexively turning around as to see who had clapped their hands, Subaru held his breath upon spotting an unknown figure present. In a corner of the cabin, where no one had been, a tall figure now stood before anyone had been able to notice. Clapping their hands together, that person had been watching the exchange taking place until then, without anyone in the cabin having noticed their presence. Goes, who are you? How in the world did you get here? Ah, darn. Well, I accidentally clapped even though no one called for me. This won't do. It's a bad habit of mine to unconsciously be praising any praiseworthy children that I find. That instant, protecting Emilia and Abel behind him, Goes adopted a fighting stance, and before Goes, his expression having become blood-curdling, that person kept their indifferent attitude, as if everything were unrelated to them, biting the golden kiseru they had retrieved from a pocket, donning a shrewd smile. That figure already was terribly out of place, and even more conspicuous was their outward appearance. Nearly 2 meters tall and sporting black body hair, their blank, smiling countenance had some charm to it, and alongside their unkempt fur, they gave off the impression of a gentle black dog person, dressed in a kimono and biting on a kiseru, having appeared unnoticed in the coupled dragon carriages where many key figures of the Empire had assembled. That existence naturally attracted the attention of all those present. My, y'all do seem to be quite curious about me, don't ya? Emilia, who are you? Why did you come here? While turning their gaze, the dog person scratched their head with their finger. And Emilia, protected by Goze's back, inquired so of the dog person. In response to that query, the dog person tilted their head. The shape of their mouth, lined with fangs, broke into a smile, and thus spoke. Well, the name's Halibel, but mind if I pop in to give a quick howdy? Thus he declared.